Yes. Not us.
What it was 11. The grind.
Stop talking.
Mr. Sandman.
This is the mouth of the monster with the gaping mouth that Vecna showed Nancy. That's where the kids are in season 5. I've had quite a few people ask me to talk about Will's painting. This is the inside of the mouth, aka the control center, aka inside the mouth of the dragon, and that's where the kids are being kept. These spires, they're teeth. You can see the fleshy-like walls. This is inside of a living creature. It's not a dimension or a place or a cave. So green dragon theory? Are we getting closer?
Vecna has wanted Holly since season 1. This is season 1 here. When it gets her alone. Oh, this is stressful. So in season 5, there's the vanishing, just like of Will Byers in season 1, except they don't fill any names in to keep it like hidden. I think it's gonna be Holly. From what they have released and when it shows.
Ashley! Look at me!
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
What exactly is the Mind Flayer? The Mind Flayer might be the most misunderstood part of all of Stranger Things, but the answer has always been right there in front of us. All the way back in the very beginning, before Vecna, before 1, and before 11, there was simply Henry Creel. Now when Henry was young, he began to have visions about this weird dust particle, and from here is where he discovered he had powers and could manipulate the world around him. Fast forward to season 2 of Stranger Things, when we get our first glimpse of the Mind Flayer.
I was rewatching Stranger Things when I noticed something strange in the season 4 character posters. Jonathan, Mike, Argyle, and Will all have the California background because that's where they stay most of the season. But if you look at the group that was in Russia, which was Hopper, Joyce, and Murray, you can see the prison. 11's poster shows the Hawkins lab because she was there most of the season to get her powers back. But what's really weird is when you look at the posters of the people who were at the Creel house, like Max, Lucas, Dustin, and Erica, you see the house at the bottom. But one more character has the Creel house on her poster, and that's Mike's mom, Karen Wheeler. She barely appears in season 4, never visits the Creel house, and has no scenes linked to Vecna. Yet her poster shows the same house. That's why people think Karen might actually be Alice Creel, grown up and brainwashed to forget her past. And to show this is possible, Max survived Vecna's attack, so Alice could have too. Some people even think this hidden detail hints that Karen and Holly Wheeler might somehow be tied to Vecna's plan, especially after what we saw in the season 5 trailer.
Before Stranger Things Volume 1 comes out, I'm going to say all of my predictions in one video. Number 1, I think that episode 4, The Sorcerer, is going to reveal that Will Byers had powers the entire time, and specifically, I think that he's the one that created the Upside Down, but it could be a different power set. I think that Will is going to use his connection to the hive mind to help them. Specifically, I think he's going to see through the eyes of the Demogorgon this season and watch for their attacks to warn people. Every time that we saw him in a trance in the trailer, I think that that is what he's doing. 2 specific examples are when Karen and Holly are attacked, I think he's going to see that through the eyes of the Demogorgon, and I also think he's going to be seeing the attack in the barn.
that was played during the Stranger Things 5 trailer. The song is titled Who Wants to Live Forever by Queen. And before I get into the theory, we all know music plays a huge role in the Stranger Things story. So essentially, the song's message is all about how being immortal would essentially be a burden because you would have to watch everyone you love die while you just sit there and live in misery. That's why it's titled Who Wants to Live Forever. And this song was playing throughout the entirety of the trailer. And it sounded epic, by the way. I loved it. I think the message of the song could have some sort of an impact on the ending of Eleven's story.
Okay, so I think Vecna's gonna go through Max's memories and find the all too well 10-minute version music video and start watching the whole 14 minutes. And in that time, she's gonna run towards the outside and she's gonna make it. And he's gonna get so emotionally invested watching the whole music video that he himself is gonna do a slow walk into the outside. And he's gonna walk out and he's gonna have a huge embrace with Elle and have a huge embrace with everyone and be like, I'm so sorry for what I did. And then go to all of Hawkins and be like, it was not Eddie Munson that did the murders, it was me. And I'm so sorry for what I did, you guys. I'm really sorry. And he's gonna go to jail for the rest of his life. But he has parole. And then at the end of the speech, he's gonna be like, and you know what? Taylor Swift changed my life and fuck Jake Gyllenhaal.
Guys, were we even watching the same show? Will is not the new 11. He will never be 11. He can never be stronger or better than 11 because he has Vecna's powers. Who defeated Vecna at the ripe age of like 6? Banished him to another dimension, 11. Now, if we're paying attention, this is my theory on what's going to happen in the next couple of episodes. Now, if you weren't one of the many people that hated on the Lost Sister episode from season 2, you would know about Callie. Callie is 11's long-lost sister. She's number 8. She has a different power. She's able to like control people's minds. Who else has the power to control people's mind? Vecna. He can make them see whatever he imagines. Who can also do that? Callie. My theory is, you guys know how Max is able to be trapped into Henry's.
Number 1, what are her powers?
Visual.
Creating things that only certain people can see.
Correct. That aren't there.
Correct.
What are you pitching to me?
What is the main thread line of this entire show? Is kids seeing someone who is not there. Is Vecna using Dr. K potentially, or the government, or the military, or somehow just using Callie to do the Mr. What's-It? Because that is exactly her power. Is she also the one creating the entire dream world? That I don't know. It's more of a memory thing. But, like, that's specifically what she does.
I didn't connect 8 to Mr. What's-It at all. That is so interesting. You know what I think, though?
No, I don't care. There's somebody behind Vecna. There's somebody behind the Mind Flayer. There's somebody behind all of this, and I'm convinced it's Bob. So, like, you're watching Stranger Things for the first time, and you're, like, really sus about him. You think he's being weird, but then he dies, right? And you feel for him. He was so good to Joyce. She finally had some sort of semblance. What if the Mind Flayer was spying, trying to find this other unnamed bad guy? That's why the Mind Flayer is obsessed with going from the upside down to the right side up, because this other bad guy has already been in the right side up, running this shit, burning everything to the ground. Before you call me crazy, take a walk with me here. Right, it's season 2 and Will's in the hospital bed, only it's not Will talking to us, it's the Mind Flayer. And when they say we need to go get the doctors and then Bob shows up, the Mind Flayer reacts to Bob in a completely different way than everyone else. Even when the doctors are actually in the room, he is not behaving that way. Never once was he afraid of the doctors. He was afraid of the fire. He didn't want to be burned. Something about Bob working at a Radio Shack and knowing everything about this when all of it has to do with electricity, and we still don't know what that red electricity is in the Upside Down. I mean, come on. They dressed him up like a vampire. I tried to go through.
Vecna is Will's dad.
Will's dad?
Yeah, but that one's a crazy one though. Because if you put Will beside Henry, it looks way more like son and father than who's the Will's actual dad? Lonnie. Lonnie looks nothing like Will. And then Lonnie ran away. Why did Lonnie run away?
Maybe because he thought that wasn't his kid, or he knows that's not his kid.
He already knows the truth, fam, and he's not gonna tell his kid because that's a lot to go through. Imagine telling your kid like, oh, I'm not your father.
Yeah.
And you're already going through all this like shit already, like mental. I'm not gonna tell her. And then when Joyce was fighting the Demogorgon, why didn't the Demogorgon just kill Joyce there?
Why?
Because that was fam. That's Will's mom, and Henry's not gonna kill the wife.
Oh,
because he controls the Demogorgons. Fam, no, all the Demogorgons.
Wait, that makes sense. You know
Yes.
why? You know what? Because remember when in the last episode where Max was able to go back in time?
Yeah.
And who was starring in the play? Henry. Henry. And who was handing out the flyers? It was Joyce.
Yeah. No, Joyce went to there's a
The high
flyer.
school. Holy shit.
So that might actually be
She was handing out the flyers to the play, and then he was the star in the play.
In season 5, Max gets transported back to 1959. She sees Joyce handing out flyers for her school play, and guess who's listed in the cast? Henry Creel. So here's the crazy part. If Joyce and Henry were in the same play, then they actually knew each other. They weren't strangers. They could have possibly even been close friends. And we know Vecna rarely targets people at random. He usually picks people who are vulnerable or has some deep emotional connection to him. In the Volume 1 finale, Vecna tells Will the reason why he was chosen was because he was weak. But what if that isn't true? What if Vecna picked Will on purpose? Not because he was weak, but because he was Joyce's kid. The one person Henry remembered from 1959, and the only person who might have been kind to him. But this leaves the question. If Henry has such a close connection to the adult characters, why does no one recognize him, especially Joyce? He does have the ability to reach into people's minds.
I could reach into others, into their minds, their memories.
Do you think he's made them forget?
I genuinely believe that we can figure out who dies in Stranger Things Season 5 if we just think like Duffers for a second, so let's logic this out. The Duffers have said that they kill for two main reasons. The first is to set up a character's arc in a subsequent season. So Barb's death brings Nancy into the supernatural plot, Bob's death is in part what pushes Joyce to move to California, Billy's death sets up Max being Vecna in Season 4, and although we don't know how yet, we know Eddie's death is going to have a huge impact on Dustin in Season 5. When it comes to this idea of killing people off to set up character arcs in subsequent seasons, there's really no time for that in Season 5 because Season 5 is the series finale, so I think that consideration goes out the window. Which means that most of the main characters are probably safe. Dustin, Lucas, Mike, I'm gonna say safe. Robin, safe. Joyce and Hopper, safe. Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve, safe. Max, definitely safe. If they wanted to kill her off, they wouldn't have put her in a coma. And then we have these two, which brings me to the second reason that the Duffer Brothers kill characters off, and that's because it's necessary to the supernatural arc. In which case, I think these are the only two characters who have a legitimate chance of being killed. Starting with Will, remember that in Season 1, he technically flatlined and they had to do CPR on him, and the Duffers themselves have said that they don't like redundancy. So if that's the case, putting ourselves in their mindset, they probably won't kill Will off again. Not to mention, Will has not gotten a single break since Season 1, so narratively it makes a lot more sense to give him relief at the end of Season 5 rather than to just kill him off again. So, I'm gonna say Will is most likely safe. 11. I'm about 50-50 on her, and here's why. Her arc seems to really center on this idea of gaining agency, so while
Debunking popular Stranger Things 5 theories. In the summer of 2022, Alice Creel being Karen Wheeler was a really popular theory and people still believe it to this day. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen, and here's why. So some of the key arguments for the theory was that Karen's poster was different and unique to the other posters, but that actually wasn't the case. There were a few other posters that were similar to Karen's. Also, some people pointed out that Karen's reactions to the Upside Down haven't been that crazy, like she hasn't been that surprised. But honestly, I think that's overblown. The biggest points people have made though is that Karen Wheeler and Alice Creel are pretty much the same exact age and they have the same hair color, and also whenever Alice Creel died, her bones didn't really snap and her eyes weren't like gouged out, unlike Patrick, Fred, and Chrissy. But here's why the theory is not going to happen. I know not everybody was able to see it, but in the first Shadow play, it explicitly shows Karen Wheeler and Alice Creel as separate characters in the play, which is a prequel to Stranger Things. So right there, that already debunks the theory, but I'll go further. Alice Creel actually has blue eyes and Karen Wheeler has brown eyes. There's a lot of logical narrative issues, and also the Duffer Brothers have said that the parents are going to have bigger roles, but this could also be referring to the fact that Karen Wheeler and Henry Creel were classmates when they were younger, and that is also revealed in the first Shadow play. And I think Karen Wheeler looking at the snow from the Upside Down is simply just her being intuitive and not really reacting that much. I don't think it's anything to say that, like, oh yeah, she knows what that is because she's Henry Creel's little sister. I think that's pretty crazy to assume. So overall, it's not going to happen because of the first Shadow play and all that it reveals, but it is a cool and intriguing theory, and I even made a video about it because I think it's really cool to talk about and fantasize about. If you guys want me to debunk or make more theories about Stranger Things, be sure to like and follow for more.
I know what Vecna's planning in Stranger Things, and it's not what you think. This theory is starting to get popularized, and the more that I start to find things within the show, the more just absolutely true it has to be, because the pieces are fitting. Obviously, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Volume 1 yet. Vecna's going to create a time machine and stop himself from killing his family November 6, 1959. In order to best understand this theory, you have to have knowledge of the canon prequel stage play that is called The First Shadow. This stage play has everything to do with basically how Henry Creel became Vecna. In the stage play, we learned that Henry was not born with his powers, that he actually got them after stumbling upon a cave when he was 8 years old and he first met the Mind Flayer. It was after this first encounter that he then became that very disturbed little boy that we learned about in the show. A bunch of stuff happens in the play, but then years later we get to the date November 6, 1959. This is the date that we are aware that Henry lets the Mind Flayer take over and kills his family. In season 5, when we see Max running around through Vecna's memories, we see that she picks up the playbill for that date, November 6, 1959. We also see in season 5, when Will is painting on the barn, the spires in his vision, he shows that it looks like the exact same shape as a wormhole. Also important to note that there are 12 spires. Another important detail that we see is when Vecna is stalking Derek, we see that Derek is making a model of a tesseract in class. And we all know that Holly is reading A Wrinkle in Time, a book in which a tesseract is used to move through space and time. I think Vecna's going to use these kids to create his own tesseract, his own clock, because how many numbers are on a clock? 12. He's going to use these kids to create a time machine so that he goes back to November 6, 1959 and stops himself from killing his family. The play has a lot of themes that deal with basically saying that Henry didn't want to become Vecna. It's supposed to be a lot about that kind of turmoil of the Mind Flayer taking over him. I believe it was the actor who plays Will who said in an interview that Vecna is the most misunderstood villain. What if it's because he doesn't want to be?
This is the reason that Vecna is so scared of the cave that Max and Holly are in. So if you didn't know, there's actually a prequel to Stranger Things, and it's a play on Broadway called The First Shadow, and it's going to be very important to how Stranger Things ends. So in this play, Henry Vecna lives in Nevada, and he likes to go explore this cave system with his spyglass. The same one that Holly takes from his bedroom, and if you were really paying attention, there's a little Easter egg. The shape on the opening of the spyglass is actually the exact same shape as the opening in the cave. Now, the play takes place in 1943, and this is when the government was working on an experiment to make their ships invisible for the war. When they tested this machine out on their first ship, things went terribly wrong and they got sent to Dimension X, where they were all killed by Demogorgons except for one person, Captain Brenner, who's actually Dr. Brenner's father. Years later, on his deathbed, Captain Brenner tells his son everything he knows about the experiment, and Dr. Brenner becomes obsessed with trying to recreate it. So he goes to work over at the Nevada Project, which is right near where Henry would explore these caves. On one of his explorations, he runs into a scientist that stole equipment from the Nevada Project and has been hiding out in this cave system. And what happens is that they both get transported to Dimension X, where Henry runs into the Mind Flayer that alters his blood, personality, and gives him his powers before escaping back to the real world. After everything that's happened in Nevada, Henry's family moves away to Hawkins to get away from it all. Dr. Brenner is aware of what's happened, and he follows them to Hawkins, starts Hawkins' lab so that he can find Henry and continue his work. And strange things are still happening around Henry, so Dr. Brenner convinces his family to send him to Hawkins' lab so that he can figure out what's going on and stop it. But really, he just wants to use Henry to find out what's in Dimension X, and when he tries to get Henry to kill someone using his powers, Henry leaves the lab because he's still a good kid at this point. But his family is still very afraid of who he's become, and one night he overhears his mom secretly talking to Dr. Brenner, telling him that they need to take him back and lock him up for good. And this betrayal by his own mother gets him so angry that he finally lets the Mind Flayer take over. And that's when it kills her at the family dinner and tries to kill the rest of his family too. So long story short, the cave that Max and Holly are in is actually the cave from Henry's darkest memory that started everything and ruined his life forever.
If you ever wondered where the idea for Stranger Things came from, here's the conspiracy theory that heavily inspired it to the point where the show was almost called this. In the early 1970s, an electrical engineer by the name of Preston Nichols received a grant to study telepathy and determine if it was real or not, and he didn't really believe in it at all until he finally did. And during his research, he learned that telepathic waves were very similar to radio waves. This is very much seen in Stranger Things, as we know that music plays a huge role in communicating with other dimensions. And because of this grant, Preston worked with many psychics, but he noticed a very strange phenomenon that kept happening consistently. Every single day at the same exact time, the psychic's abilities would just stop working. Preston came to the realization that there was something in the area transmitting some sort of frequency that caused these psychics to get like all jammed up. Preston finally located the source of the frequency, which led him to an Air Force base called Camp Hero in Montauk, New York. This building had a huge radar, which was where the frequency was coming, but security wouldn't tell Preston any information or what it was used for. And for years, Preston was mystified by Camp Hero and what had gone on this base and why he was so drawn to it. Until finally, the truth revealed itself in 1990. Repressed memories came flooding back to Preston, and he remembered everything about the Montauk Project. Camp Hero, this Air Force base, had underground tunnels where the government was studying kidnapped boys, better known as the Montauk Boys. These boys were runaways or orphans, so they had very little people questioning their disappearances, and the government studied these kids to unlock psychic abilities, including mind control, telekinesis, remote viewing, telepathy, object materialization, and even time traveling into different dimensions. Very similar to Dr. Brenner kidnapping his test subjects, including 11, to study these exact abilities. A part of the Montauk Project was the Montauk Chair, and this was used in order to amplify the kids' psychic abilities. This chair helped the boys tap into their full psychic potential, so if we're thinking Stranger Things, this is very similar to the deprivation tanks and tubs that 11 uses to help her abilities. Amongst the Montauk boys was Duncan. He was a very particularly gifted boy who could tap into his psychic abilities unlike any of the other kids. Sound familiar? However, the Montauk Project came to a crashing halt when something went very, very wrong. You may be wondering how this Preston Nichols guy even is related to this story, and how does he even know all of this? Well, Preston Nichols stated that he worked at Camp Hero for the Montauk Project and remembers working with Duncan, but the government wiped his memories, of course, until one day they just came flooding back. Duncan and Preston had enough of the Montauk Project and wanted to put an end to it. So one day in 1983, which let's not forget, Stranger Things storyline begins in 1983, Duncan was in the chair and he materialized a giant monster that rampaged through the lab. Everyone in the lab was scrambling to cut the power so the monster would dematerialize, but that didn't work, so the Montauk chair was destroyed, so the monster went back to its dimension. And with the chair being destroyed, this was the end of the Montauk Project. The base was sealed, the tunnels were locked, and everything was denied. Now, is there official proof of the Montauk Project? No. All this information comes from Preston Nichols himself, who wrote a book, but whether it's real or not, it does make for a pretty good TV show.